Now we're going to have our public forum on gun violence in America and the Second Amendment. It's moderated by Joe Kincannon, who's our first vice president of our club. First, a couple of words about each of our panelists here. We have Robert Golub. Robert Golub is a nationally and internationally published columnist. He's an MMA instructor, so be respectful towards him, or you might do a takedown maneuver, which he does on me. And we have here Donna Marino. Donna is a licensed clinical social worker and a dear friend of ours, a friend of our club. Actually, I met her right in this area. She lives in this area. I met her. She was a Democrat while I was petitioning with Mary Lawhorn. And I was wearing my MAGA hat, and she smiled. So we went over and became friends. I gave her a registration. She changed to Republican. The first meeting we brought her to was a meeting with then candidate Donald Trump introducing Vice President Pence at the Hilton Hotel in Manhattan. And he shook her hand. So that's Donna Marino. And we also have here Professor Nicholas Giordano. He's a professor of political science at Suffolk Community College. And we saw him on Tucker Carlson. So Ira Harris said, Phil, you got to get this guy. He's incredible. He's very articulate on the Constitution and on Second Amendment issues. Bring him down. We contacted him, and here he is. Folks, enjoy the panel. It's going to be very stimulating and educational. And I'll give it over to Joe. Here you go, Joe.
Thank you, Phil. This should be very, very good tonight. We ask you to remain respectful all times, whether you agree or disagree with any of our speakers. Each of them is passionate in their area, and they're going to get 5 minutes to start off, each one of them. Tell you a little about themselves and where they stand on the issue, sort of like an overview summary. And then we're going to kick it up a notch. That's when Donna will read a statement, Mr. Giordano will get into a few things, and then our good friend Robert here will get into his piece as well. I wanted to start this off tonight, ladies and gentlemen, with the most hallowed of hallowed documents in our country. It's called the Constitution of the United States. And this is at the epicenter of everything that we do and how we play fairly on the field of politics in the United States of America. So it starts off with, and I'm not going to read a lot, but I'm going to read two pieces of this. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. You do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. There is one more piece I wanted to read, and that focuses in more narrowly on our discussion tonight. And it's in the amendments to the Constitution of the United States of America, Amendment 2. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open it up tonight, and as I told our valued speakers here, I'm impartial, ladies first. All right, so I'm going to pass the mic to Donna Marino.
Thank you, Joe. And it's a pleasure to be here. I was looking forward to this for quite some time, and welcome everybody to a very interesting and important conversation that we're going to have tonight. My name is Donna Marino. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have an extensive background in psychiatric social work. I'm a graduate of St. John's University and New York University. St. John's right here in Queens. And I'm also licensed in New York and in Florida. I'm going to make a statement in a few minutes, and I would like to encourage everyone tonight to think about the direct effect mental health has on gun violence. I look forward to getting into that.
Thank you very much. And Nicholas, you're next.
Thank you. Do you mind if I stand? No, not at all. Hi, thank you for having me. And when Phil contacted me, I was actually a little taken aback. I didn't know Republicans still existed in the city area. So, but when I found out that he was for real, then I agreed to come down. I've been teaching for a long time. I started teaching at Suffolk Community College in 2006. When I first started teaching, I was only an adjunct part-time. And I was also working with Homeland Security, Division of Homeland Security in New York State. So I know the cesspool that New York State is. And I was stationed here in the city for a lot of that part too. So I know the cesspool New York City politics is. Guys, I don't know. Hopefully we make the comeback here. When we're looking at it, basically the way I try and encourage my students, I always encourage them to keep an open mind. More importantly, I always teach them to critically think, to stop looking at the superficial arguments that exist, to start really exploring the issues. You know, one of the things that happens in the United States, and this is a phenomenon that I see that's becoming more and more of a problem, is when we see something happen, our knee-jerk reaction is automatically, let's go to the government and government's going to solve that problem. And we forget all about why the country was set up and the intent of the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers spoke about how it's about self-reliance, how we got to take care of some of the problems on our own, and we can't always rely on government to help us out. You know, take education, for example. The United States is performing horribly. We rank 30th in the world. We're the sole superpower of the world. We're the wealthiest country in the world. And yet our standards have continually dropped. Our students are performing. 37% can only read and write at the college level, graduating seniors this year. And when you look at it from that perspective, we're always told that it's because the schools don't have any money. And so just put more money into the schools. And we've been doing that for now 30 years. Schools have got more money. And the performance has actually dropped. The same thing holds true with guns. When we look at guns, the easy answer is always, well, let government pass a law, and that's going to fix the problem. But if government passes a law, I assure you that that's not going to solve the problem. Mass shootings will still occur, death will still occur, there will be gun violence, and it's not going to fix anything. The reason it's not going to fix anything is because we're not exploring the issue in the right way. We're looking at the problems as if guns are the problem, rather than culture being the problem, and a shift in our culture. And so when we explore this issue, I want you to keep in mind that if you go back prior to the 1980s, there was virtually no gun laws on the books. You had, the only one I can think of off the top of my head was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that was to license people that wanted to sell guns. More households, there are more guns today, but at the time, more households had guns, and there were hardly any mass shootings. In the 90s, we started to see an increase in mass shootings. In the late 90s, obviously, Columbine now marked the modern-day mass shooting. In the 2000s, we continued to see the increase. Starting in 2008, the increase started to take off even more dramatically. Now, we do have to put it in perspective, okay? The amount of people that will die each year from a mass shooting is actually still relatively low. It's about 150, okay, from the way the FBI classifies mass shootings. You got a better chance of getting hit by a car here in the city than you do dying in a mass shooting. But we have to recognize what changed in our society that led to this increase. And that's what we need to start exploring, and hopefully we'll do a little bit of that tonight.
Thank you, Nicholas. All right, Robert, go ahead.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me. Actually, I want to thank Joe and Phil. The way this developed was Phil and I very good friends, and this is, and we're very close friends, but this gun issue has really been a divide for us. Close friends already. Oh, Joe, you're always invited over. You just never come. And it's been a divide, and there are emotional reasons, because human beings are emotions, and people getting killed are really human beings. Now, Joe was a friend of mine, by the way, started by mentioning the Second Amendment. I agree. Unfortunately, there are 36,000 Americans who die every year because of the Second Amendment. And here are the victims of the Florida shooting. So I'll show that and add that to your piece. The first 5 weeks this year, 7 police officers have been killed by gun violence. 7 police officers, not in England, not in Paris, in the United States of America. So let's start there. My good friend mentions the number of people not being a lot. Unless you're one of the people who lost to someone who you loved, that's number one. Number two, there are 36,000 people in total who die of gun violence every year. And when I hear things such as, and I was getting a little bit off the agenda, but I actually brought 5 attachments. Now I made 30 copies. I failed. I should have made more. Why? Because Joe and Phil and Phil's predecessor, Phil Seeker, really are incredible leaders. They really are, and they give me the chance to speak here. So 30 is not enough, and probably about 100 people. But I'd like you to go over later particular columns that you could refer to that might impact upon the way you think. So I'll read them to you later. But in terms of, the rabbi mentioned something about the Muslim fanatics, etc., etc. I write a column. I have 20 papers that cover my column. One of them is Muslim Community Report. The only one of the few Muslims in the world who devotes himself to having peace, pro-Israel, pro-Christian. One of my best friends. Because I write for them, I get letters from the Muslim group, CARE. And what are they focusing on? Taking guns away from Muslim terrorists. There are 750,000 people on the terrorist watch. And guess what? They're really upset about this. Why should these people not have guns? Guess who joins them? The NRA. And anyone here who supports the NRA. So I just want you to think about that for a second. Think about that for a second. Okay, my background is out of an educator, retired school supervisor, a writer, a college professor of English. But Joe, I want to stay on this for a second. So I want to make very quickly the point you made about a mental health issue. Now, by the way, I'm going to go over the attachments later, so you could refer to this and see whether or not I'm telling you the truth or making this up. But remember, you count, you matter. And if you could take courageous decisions and say, you know what, the NRA is no friend of ours, then you've really been John Kennedy's profile of courage. Attachment 4, which I'll show you later, in terms of mental health. More than 450 people worldwide, and over 61 million adults and 7 million children in the U.S. suffer from mental disorders. So you know what I think we should do? Let's throw 60 million people in mental institutions. No, it transcends that. When you have 300 million guns out, and 65 million people who have mental issues. Doesn't it issue in the hospitals? You have what's resulted in this 35,000 people being murdered, including the people who are mentioned here. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you all. Let's give them a hand, guys. All right, now, well, there's a lot here, huh? Wow, that's a lot. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the mic over to Donna, and Donna is going to make a statement, and then after that, I'm going to wing it over to Nicholas, all right, and then we'll go back to Bob, and we'll get into it. It's okay.
Thanks, John. I want to start off by saying it has been argued a gun does not pull a trigger, a person pulls the trigger. But the person pulling the trigger will be someone who has a mental illness. I think we can safely assume a mentally stable and healthy individual will not be inclined to kill anyone. Most, if not all, criminals have some form of mental illness. Minor crimes can be a case of poor judgment and a mistake. But even that is a red flag for the potential of more serious crimes. Conversely, all mentally ill people are not criminals. We must be careful not to stigmatize mental illness when discussing this important connection to shootings. More than likely, those who are mentally ill are unlikely to commit a crime. All too often, a criminal is seen as a hostile person rather than a person with a mental illness who needs treatment. Criminal behavior is sociopathic. Sociopaths lack remorse, they lack guilt, and they lack shame. They are unable to empathize with the pain and suffering of the victims. A sociopath carries a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. There are other serious mental illnesses which impair reality and judgment, such as schizophrenia, psychosis, and substance abuse. Again, I emphasize, not all mentally ill people are sociopaths or likely to commit crimes. Most mentally ill people are not violent and are unlikely to commit a crime, and I want to emphasize that because we cannot stigmatize mental illness. Let's take a look at some of the shooters involved in gun violence to help us understand the reason mental health and mental health treatment needs attention. Nicholas Cruz killed 17 students and staff in Parkland, Florida. He had a history of threatening people. Cruz said he heard the voice of a demon commanding him to buy an AR-15 firearm and kill people. It sounds to me like Cruz had psychosis with command-type auditory hallucinations. Adam Lanza killed almost 24 children in Sandy Hook Elementary School. He had a long history of developmental and psychiatric disorders. He also had discontinued his psychiatric medication. Jiverly Wong, in one of New York's most deadliest mass shootings, killed 13 people. He fired 98 shots from 2 handguns before killing himself. It was reported Wong suffered from paranoid delusions. And last but not least, Dylan Roof massacred 9 African Americans during a prayer service. His legal counsel described him as delusional and abnormal. Roof was allowed to buy a gun even though he had been arrested for a drug felony. The information about his felony went unnoticed due to a clerical error during his background check. When purchasing a gun and during a background check, a general mental health history is excluded. The Health Insurance and Portability and Accountability Act, what we know as HIPAA, protects all of us. It also protects the potential shooter by not allowing the disclosure of mental illness and treatment. As a result, shooters gain access to guns when cleared by the background check to purchase a gun. Here's the dilemma. Number 1, protect our personal privacy, or 2, disclose important health information to prevent guns from getting into the wrong hands. Both are important, but one invades our privacy and the other can protect our lives. Gun violence is a problem due to a combination of different causes. It's not just one thing. Gun violence is a symptom of a broken system. We cannot solve what we are not willing to address and fix. From recognizing mental health issues, deficiencies in background checks, illegal firearms purchased on our streets, and minimal mental health facilities and limited mental health coverage. We will not fix this by removing guns from law-abiding citizens. We can fix it by addressing all of the broken parts of an entire system in need of reform.
And Donna is also very well published, and her article has appeared in some major newspapers and magazines around the area. All right. Now we're going to go to Nicholas. And Nicholas, my question to you really is one that concerns this very, very tiny little book called the Constitution. God knows if Trump can hug a flag, I can hug this book, because this is the essence of our freedom. Wow, these guys are super smart. But Nicholas, my question to you is the U.S. Constitution a living document? Is it something that we should just, change on a whim? What is its, what is its relevance? This thing was written how many years ago? I mean, a lot of years ago. 232 years ago. All right? I mean, what's its relevance today? What does it mean? Well, what should it mean?
Well, I am going to get to the relevance of the Constitution in a second, but I do want to clarify the numbers, because once again, when we're having this debate, we need to talk about the numbers. So I just want to talk about the data for a second. If you look between 2007 and to 2016, it's 10 years worth of data. It's on average 33,000 people died from gun violence. But here's the thing, 60.5% is suicide. So we can't simply say that if we pass gun laws, that those people still wouldn't have committed suicide. I'm not saying that we dismiss them, but we can't make just make the assumption that they'd still be alive today and they wouldn't have found another means to commit suicide. Secondly, that leaves us with about 13,000 people. University of Pittsburgh did a study, 79% out of that 13,000 victims from homicides, from gun violence, is conducted through illegally obtained firearms. Illegally obtained, where no gun law would have fixed that. Thirdly, we're talking about then a data sample of about 2,500 individuals that die each and every year through gun violence. Now, I will be honest, to find out every single one of those and who's behind it is extraordinarily difficult. Still working on it. When I finish, I will get it published. But one of the things, common traits that you notice of mass shootings, because that's why we even have this conversation, is that almost in every case, none of them would have failed a background check. In almost every single one of those cases. And so, once again, we have to be aware of the laws and how they would actually work. Now, as far as the Constitution is something that our founding fathers created that can stand the test of time. There's a reason they wrote it. And I just want to get to something with the Second Amendment, because one of the things that I like to do is look at the Federalist Papers, because the Federalist Papers explain the Constitution with much more depth. And in Federalist 46, written by James Madison, Madison talks about the idea of a militia, and what a militia consists of. Now, most people think that the idea of a militia is a military. And if you look at Federalist 46, it distinguishes. An army is different than a militia. If you look at our United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, it calls out the army and distinguishes it from a militia. So what is a militia? And in one of the sentences, Madison explains how a militia is made up of Americans, how it's made up of citizens. And the militia is actually designed to protect us from the army and from the government, from when the government becomes abusive and tyrannical. And that's what it is. That's why the Constitution is extraordinarily relevant in this argument. Our founding fathers did not trust government. They did not want to give government an enormous amount of power. Unfortunately, after the failures of the Articles of Confederation, they realized that they had to empower the federal government somehow, somewhat, the central government somehow, somewhat. And they decided that an armed citizenry would be able to protect the government from becoming corrupt, from the government becoming tyrannical. And that's what we fail to explore today. I mean, if you look at almost every single country that transformed from a democratic institutions, and then they went into the idea of authoritarian regimes. One of the first things those authoritarian regimes do is they place restrictions on guns before they outright ban guns. Yes. Okay, and we see this time and time again, the most recent case being Venezuela. Now, it didn't work out too well for the Venezuelan people because they have nothing to protect themselves against Maduro's military. If you look at the United States, New York State, God help us, Governor Cuomo just signed a law that says that the government has the right to take away a firearm if that person is deemed a threat to the public. Now, I want to make this clear. In my classroom, I am constantly criticizing government. It's my job to criticize government. It's my job to question government. I criticize all the politicians. I make fun of the Democrats, I make fun of Republicans. Equal opportunity. I'm fair like that. Well, I can't predict what our country is going to look like in 25 years. But what if I have some state official, state bureaucrat sitting in my class, and they determine that I'm trying to incite violence against the government because I constantly criticize and bash the government? Why should government, what if they determine I'm the threat? And then they take my firearm away. And then what recourse do I have? I have to now take money out of my pocket to go hire a lawyer? Oh wait, the new law doesn't talk about the recourse really. and the procedures and the due process that's supposed to exist for American citizens. So I never committed a crime. Government's considering me a threat because I speak out against them, and I have no due process to clear my name, get a firearm, none. That's the thing. We have to be careful in this country and not overreact. You go down a slippery slope. Understand this. Every single president, the state's no different, but every single president has expanded the powers of the executive branch. Every single one. Regardless if they're Democrat, regardless if they're Republican, it doesn't matter. Nobody can predict who's going to be in power 40 years from now. Nobody can predict how much power the federal government, the executive branch, will have. Congress is derelict in its duty. It's abdicated its responsibility, and it's really given these presidents powers. Now they want to take it back to Trump. So now they get time. Okay, but they've been doing it for the last 70 years. They've been giving power to the executive branch. The executive branch doesn't freely give up its power. So what happens when the government decides, well, you know what, we have an executive branch, Congress is useless because they don't do anything, and so we're all going to govern as presidents through pen and paper and declare executive orders. I don't know if anyone remembers the 2012 executive order talking about armed predator drones on U.S. soil, where it gave the president the right to use armed predator drones on U.S. soil for an imminent threat. But it didn't define what an imminent threat was. Be careful. The writing's on the wall of what happens in societies when you give government too much power. The one thing that keeps us safe is the idea that the American citizenry is armed. And yes, we do have 300 million guns in this country. And listen, if the United States military decided that it's going to turn against people, it would be very ugly. I'm not going to deny that. Okay, but the Second Amendment doesn't exist to go hunting. It doesn't exist necessarily to protect your home from intruders. It exists for a corrupt and abusive government. And when that happens, that's when the
Thank you. And you kind of beat me to the punch because I didn't want to say. No. In the Constitution, before we the people, there are what's called guiding virtue and freedom and some principles. One of the things that Madison said, James Madison, a well-instructed people alone can be permanently free. And we fulfill our mission of the Queens Village Republican Club by making sure that you are educated, all right, so that you can be a free people. So we strive for that in our mission at every single monthly meeting that we have. It brings me great pleasure to give the microphone over to Robert, who's a longtime friend.
Thank you, Joe. A little disappointed as the people responded. Now, one person referred to any of the victims here. Now, if we had the family of Trooper Lucas Dove, who was killed last week here, maybe there'd be a little bit of a different discussion. And maybe the applause might not have been quite as loud. If we had the family of Luke Hoyer, a 15-year-old kid who was killed in Florida, maybe the applause wouldn't be so loud. Disappointed in it. You, however, are on my side because you were making the point about people with disabilities. The problem is we want to prevent them from having weapons, the NRA is put every effort on that part. Very quickly, when Phil said he was calling the NRA, I said, they're not going to come. Why aren't they going to come? They have something in common with Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter will come and speak on the Middle East and criticize the state of Israel, unless there's someone advocate for Israel there. Then he won't show up. Won't show up. Al Gore will speak on climate change. One caveat, won't have anyone there who disagrees with it. The same with the NRA. That's why I told my good friend Phil, they're not coming. They're not coming. Why? Because they've been against every reasonable act of gun control. I just want to go very quickly, and I won't take on, I just want to okay, I do. Okay, thank you. And I'm emotional. Because I think the kids, when I was an administrator, kids I had who got killed by firearms. When my daughter goes to a concert, I said, what, God forbid, if there's a lunatic there? And one of my workout partners was a cop, says to me, I dropped my 2 kids off at school, the most conservative guy in the world. I'm terrified of the guns. What if some lunatic comes there? I go to visit schools. It's set up like you're trying to get into the White House. Why? They're concerned about people with guns. So with all due respect to your numbers, you take the educators there. You're telling them they shouldn't be that careful? Is that what you're saying to them? Okay, why don't you go to the schools, tell them not to have the security, because the chances are very, very small. Okay, the first attachment I have, and you can write this down. The NRA supported gun control when the Black Panthers had the weapons. What happened with gun control, no one of the experts here referred to that. The NRA got involved when the Black Panthers in the 1960s started walking around with guns, and they would put it in the face of cops. And they would say, we're protected by the Second Amendment. The NRA, by the way, at that time, went against them. Ronald Wilson Reagan, God bless that great man's soul, signed a law to put the first serious gun control law in effect in California. Ronald Wilson Reagan also supported the Brady Act, which the NRA is against, by the way. So what I'd like you to do is look at this column. The NRA supported gun control when the Black Panthers had the weapons. You might find it edifying. And if you think of yourselves as a parent, as a grandparent, an uncle, an aunt, rather than some political person, just think your kid being there. Just think it's your kid. How the NRA rewrote the Second Amendment. And what do they mention here? Pretty interestingly, that he didn't rule on the Second Amendment until 2008. It was never an issue. It became an issue when the Black Panthers got involved. It wasn't an issue. So I'd like you to look at that. Again, it's called How the NRA Rewrote the Second Amendment. And points they make which are pretty interesting, just as liberals have rewritten the Constitution. They want to have climate change in there. Same-sex marriage in there. That's exactly what the NRA did. And why aren't they there today, Joe? Because they know they'll be facing someone like me. And they have no answers for that. They have none. And you think of yourselves as parents and grandparents before you stop and before you applaud using guns. By the way, our great president, Donald Trump, just passed the gun control prohibition. Guess who didn't do that? Barack Obama. So I want to say God bless President Trump. Isn't it interesting? I don't get the applause on that. President Trump puts his own career on the line because he had the courage to go against the NRA, but many people here didn't have the courage to applaud that. Pretty sad. Pretty sad. Attachment 3. Justice Scalia's gun control argument. Scalia says, the court said on handguns in private homes went too far. The ban went too far, but the regulation of gun ownership was compatible with the Second Amendment. Guys, that's Scalia. That's Scalia. Next preface, we'll talk about this. Attachment 4. Again, that would be Justice Scalia gun control argument. You can look that up. Preface attachment 4. About mental disease. I mentioned it before, I'll repeat it. More than 61 million adults and over 7 million children have psychological problems. So you know what? You're going to have to open up 65 million offices to treat these people. Come on! We want to keep guns away from these people. Think of it as your child, your grandchild. Let's get over this groupthink. That's what leftists do. Leftists do groupthink. Republicans have their own minds. That's why I'm a Republican. But with this, when you're talking about allowing 33,000 people to die and doing nothing about it, we get to another point you mentioned too, which is attachment 5. This is a column that I wrote. That went all over the world, not all over the country. Very disappointingly, usually when I write a column that's picked up by like-minded people, I couldn't get any of the pro-gun control people to actually pick it up. It was pretty disappointing to me. But it did well. It did well because I think God was on my side. I really mean that because you talked about people dying. And you mentioned about suicide. is something called red flag laws, which the NRA, by the way, is against. The red flag laws in the states where they were passed actually reduce suicide significantly. Now, you're a psychologist, and you understand people with mental disease are ill. To say, well, they should have guns, so if they kill themselves, no, it's our obligation to make sure they don't have that. The red flag laws work. So I'd like you to read my column, which is, the NRA's war against gun safety legislation. Easiest way to write it, my name and MUCRAC. And I go over ways, research-based ways to reduce gun violence. Research-based ways. The NRA was against every one of those.
Oh, yeah.
So I just want you to be aware of that. I didn't mean to insult anybody, but we're all parents and grandparents, and before you think of political stuff, think about your own children. Think about your own grandchildren. Thank you, Joe.
I got a question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Phil, do me a favor. All right, we are gonna open up the floor because we do want the questions. All right, and no, we're gonna need that for the speakers. All right, so just go back one at a time. All right, and only questions, no comments, only questions.
I got a question for Robert.
Who is it for?
For Robert. From the gist of it, it sounds like you're opposed to people with guns.
No, I didn't say that.
But it sounds like let me finish my statement. It sounds like you're against the NRA for whatever their beliefs are, and it sounds like we're in a state right now, don't rush me, Joe, please. We're in a state right now that is trying to take people's guns away. Suffolk County, Nassau County, Suffolk, and upstate, you walk in with your license, you buy a long gun, no problem. New York City, long gun, everything is permit, licenses and everything. I don't see mass shootings in Suffolk County and Nassau. I'm not saying killings don't happen, but there's no mass shootings every single day like it sounds like you and the left pushes. In your house, it's so difficult to protect your house. But when you turn on the news every single day,
Can you get to the question?
when you turn on the news every single day, the bad guy is shooting people. It's caught on cameras. We don't have the right to protect ourselves. So what's your answer? That we can make it more accessible for the good person to be able to get a gun here in New York State and in the city.
If I can answer, number one, you're the first person I could ever remember who said I belong to the left. If you read my columns, I think Hillary Clinton has a hit out on me for my attack on her through Janine Pirro. I interviewed Janine Pirro. You don't have to say that. Secondly, I wish that the NRA and people like you actually devoted yourselves to trying to make a way for people like yourself to get guns legally. I think that would be a very good thing. I support the Second Amendment. I'm simply saying when you have 35,000 people dying every year, to say, as my good friend Phil once said, oh, not a large number, they're not statistics. So I'll do everything I can, I'll work together with you to see that people who should have guns should have them. But before we do that, we have to take them away from people who shouldn't have them. You seem to be flippant about people, not that many people died in Suffolk or Nassau. Speak to the parents who lost their children. Tell them that. Tell them that. I'm curious what they'd say to you.
All right, I gotta, in order to keep this moving along, and I gotta really ask you to be disciplined about this. All right, it's gotta be a question. If it's not a question, we're gonna skip you and go to the next person. All right, Rabbi, go ahead.
Okay, Nicholas, could you please expand on, you said the issue was related to culture, and I believe you're correct, please expand.
Absolutely. So when you're looking at the timeline, we know the internet comes around in the 1990s. That's when it starts gaining in popularity, and we start seeing an increase in shootings. Go through the early 2000s, and you look at how movies have changed. You look at how television shows have changed. You look at how music has changed. They all become a lot more violent, no more moral messages in them. You know, I remember growing up, we had Growing Pains. There was always a moral message at the end of the story. And Charles in Charge, they always had the moral message. Those were out the window. Now it's about violence and sex and drugs, and that's what it's become. And then all of a sudden, in 2006, you see the iPhone come out. Social media starts really taking off. And that's when we start seeing the mass shootings increase dramatically. With the social media, what I propose it's done, it's dehumanized us, okay? If you look at the profiles, a lot of mass shooters, it's not like it's just random. It's just random individuals that are shooting. They all follow similar profiles. They're all young. They're mostly white. They're all between the age of 14 and 24 for the most part, for most mass shootings. They all play the video games, and they all had social online presence, and they were isolated. So those are the common traits in most of the mass shooters. And so when we're looking at it, we have to ask ourselves, why is it that these young people, so once again, you go back to the 50s and 60s, people as young as 9 years old were firing guns. They had handguns, they had semi-automatic weapons. The guns have not changed in 80 years, okay? So they had the same weapons. It was no problem for someone in the 50s and 60s to go into their backyard, shoot firearms at the age of 9, 10, 11 years old. In today's day and age, these kids are much more sheltered, much more, handled with kids' gloves. And all of a sudden, they go online, they isolate themselves, and they feel it's acceptable to take human lives before they try and take out their own lives. And so we have to ask, why is that the problem? Now, I don't have the answer to this. I can't answer that question. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not in the medical field. But we have to look at the common linkage, and that's the problem. We're totally missing the point. We're focusing so much on guns. Just to give an example, Nassau County Police Commissioner, Pat Ryder, okay, he's a friend of mine. I had him come speak at Suffolk Community College, and he said every time he walks into school and he asks, what's your biggest worry? What's your biggest fear? Every time the principal and the administrators will say school shooting. They'll say, no, it's not. Why not? He says, drugs. That's your biggest problem. Drugs. They're infesting everything. Now you bring me, what if it's your kids? I could say that way. I have an 8 and 4-year-old. I could say with any issue. What if alcohol or drugs kills my children that way? What if it's a gun? What if it's an illegal immigrant? I could use that with any argument. It doesn't matter. Okay, the reality is that as my children grow up, I'm much more fearful of them dying in a car accident from drinking and driving or drugs than I am in any mass shooting. And so we have to be honest, and I'm just focusing on the problem. The children of today have changed dramatically. That's why the mass shooter is of a certain profile. Vegas was the anomaly. That was the anomaly to the rule. We still don't like it. But we have to recognize what the problem really is.
Thank you, Nicholas. All right, I've got 2 hands and now a third. All right, I'm going to go to the yellow tie, I'm going to go to Tom, and then I'm going to go to the gentleman in the corner seat over there. Yellow tie.
Yeah, hi, my name is Lou.
Speak up, please.
Yeah, hi, my name is Lou. I have a straightforward question
For who?
for the whole panel.
Okay, so we're going to go all 3 of you. Go ahead.
Anybody. The question is the following statement true or false? And the statement is that guns save a lot more lives than they take away. That is
Okay, so the statement, just so everybody hears it, is guns save a lot more lives than they take. Correct? Okay, we're going to start with Robert, and then we're going to walk to the other side here. Make it quick, 2 minutes.
I'm going to try to be real polite. I called the NRA up before I wrote this column. And I said, just really for credibility, I said, guys, I'm writing a column where it really attacked me. I believe in the Second Amendment, by the way. But I believe that we have the right to live and our children live. I said, guys, could you send me some information of how guns have saved people? Give me 2 or 3 anecdotes. They couldn't even do that. That, where you got that, I'd really like to know and do my research. I've done a tremendous amount of research. That hasn't come up once. So the answer is, I don't know where you got that. Gotta look.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Don.
Do guns save lives? Yes, if they're in the right hands.
I'll say true, and I think Texas is a great example. If we look at certain places in Texas, particularly when it comes to the Houston area. After Hurricane Katrina, you saw an increase in violence in Houston because of evacuees. Then Texas is an open carry state. In one incident, there was a carjacking. The person that was driving the car pulled out his firearm, killed the person that was attempting the carjacking. Carjackings didn't exist in Texas after that.
Thank you very much. The next question we're going to take is going to be from Tom Zemich. Tom, go ahead. Me speak loudly, please.
I'll try to. My question is to the gentleman on your left.
All right, to Robert.
Why then, after the Parkland shooting, did Mayor de Blasio take metal detectors out of the schools? Number 1. Metal detectors, he made it a point to take metal detectors out of school. I may be wrong, but that's what I remember reading. Number two, there are organizations around this country who volunteered veterans and ex-law enforcement people to go and guard schools. And they were all denied, saying it's not right. They don't want that. So then what are we supposed to do to protect the kids? You talk about grandkids and kids. If this is a solution that real American patriots are willing to do, volunteer time and stand in front of a school and protect the school.
Tommy, I gotta limit you to your first question, I'm sorry.
It's pretty interesting that people think when you believe that should be gun control and the government's responsible for the safety of its citizens and allowing 36,000 people to die every year makes you part of the left. Maybe I'm in another planet. I'm a conservative. I believe as conservatives do that it's the obligation of the government to protect people. Now, what you're saying, I think de Blasio is the worst mayor in the history of the city, and I totally support those efforts. And I totally support people who pass background checks and could get guns. I totally support that. All I'm saying is it's the government's obligation to say, for example, anyone who knows me would say I really shouldn't have a gun. Why? Mentally stable, but I'd be shooting the wrong people. Thus, I couldn't pass a test to have a gun. Thus, I shouldn't have a gun. So I totally agree with that. My whole argument here is, and please read my column. You owe it, just please read it, that we have to have reasonable gun control laws. That doesn't make me a leftist. That doesn't make me de Blasio. It makes me Justice Berger. It makes me Justice Scalia. It makes me Rudy Giuliani. And by the way, the NRA was against Sullivan. So I hope that answers your question.
Is there anybody else with a question? Herb? And then Ronnie?
I'd like to ask Bob, how do you reconcile the dramatic reductions in homicides over the last 20 years with the dramatic increase in private gun ownership in the country? More guns does equal less violence, less murder.
Except if you take it, oh yeah, great. If you go to countries like England, France, you don't have 33,000 people dying every year. And basically we have, and also in a certain sense it's a demographic question. So if you go, let's say, to places like Texas and Arizona, we have basically middle-class people who work hard, working people. Guns tend not to be an issue. But when you go, let's say, to urban areas, St. Louis, New York City, New Jersey, areas like that, where you have a large amount of people who come from single-parent families, and then they have access to guns. And those 300 million guns didn't drop from the sky. They're there because the NRA and the gun manufacturers wanted to be there. Then you have tremendous crime. So it's really going on. And actually, I did an interview with Heather McDonald about 2 years ago, and Heather said to me, if you look at these urban areas, crime is going up. And that, if you look again at Mayor de Blasio in the precincts, and Joe, I think, will confirm this. In fact, Joe, I know you told me this when you were in the city councilman. I wrote a column and I supported Joe, because he's a great man, he really is. But that came up. He said the precincts that are in the urban areas, the poorer areas that have single-parent families, crime is skyrocketing. So I just want you to be aware of that. When you have the right people who own guns, which I support, you're not going to have gun violence. When you have people who shouldn't have guns, including the mentally ill, then you are going to have gun problems.
Thank you. Ronnie, stand up and speak. Professor?
Yeah, I've asked this question before, but I'm still kind of stymied by the response I get. How is it that Cuomo can just make a law that supersedes our federal law? That is our right. So if we have to abide by every other, we have to pay federal income tax, we have to do all these things that the federal government says we have to do, how do they just cherry pick which ones they don't want us to have and which ones we do?
Well, I don't think Governor Cuomo is signing laws that are actually constitutional. I think we're going to find that out. They are being challenged in the Supreme Court right now, and it has to work their way up. The new law that was just signed in, that's going to take at least a couple of years before it gets to the Supreme Court's desk. So I believe the SAFE Act is going to be the first one that they're going to hear. And then they'll get to this gun law, and I think that they will be ruled unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has ruled time and time again that while states can put certain types of restrictions in place, like I have no problem with a background investigation, I don't think most Americans do. While they have the ability to put certain restrictions in place, they can't violate your due process. okay? They can't sit there and ban guns just because they don't like a particular gun. And so when you're looking at it, the last major case was Chicago, where Chicago tried to ban handguns. And the Supreme Court ruled that you can't do that, that's a violation of the Second Amendment and what the intent of the Founding Fathers were. I think that's the same thing you're going to see with the SAFE Act. I think it's going to be knocked down. And I think it's the same thing with this new law. I think the new law is probably the most concerning out of all of them, because as I said, a simple accusation against someone and you could get their gun taken away. Well, gee, if I'm a criminal, can't I just make an anonymous phone call saying, oh, there's a gun in the house, saying this person may be a threat, and go at the house? Now, is that likely to happen? The answer is no. But the potential exists. It's a power that could be easily abused. And that's my concern. Once again, I'm not a shill for the NRA. It doesn't matter to me if people join it, people don't try it. I care less about the NRA. I don't belong to it, and I never will. I don't belong to most organizations. What I will say, though, is I am concerned about the abuse of governmental power. And I think it's clear that government has consistently overstepped its bounds. And if we let them get away with it, that's it. It's game over, let's face it. I mean, when you look at the laws that are now being considered and now being passed, sooner or later, the republic that we have is gone. We're so willing to give up more power to government each and every day because we want to be safe. Listen, I am someone that understands the risk of a republic. I am willing to take the chance. Hopefully I never die in a mass shooting. Hopefully I never encounter a mass shooting. But I'm willing to take the chance of not passing laws that don't make any sense because the only people that follow laws are mostly law-abiding people, so it's irrelevant. But I'm willing to take that chance than pass a law that's going to come back and bite us 50 years down the road.
Thank you, Professor. I know we could probably go on until 10 o'clock, maybe even later, but I just got the hi-ho here. I've got to keep it to a minimum. So, Phil, tell me the gentleman's question.
Aside from background checks,
Aside from background checks,
shouldn't there be a test for the reason?
shouldn't there be a test for a reason
The reason why people want the gun in the first place?
why people want a gun in the first place? Who wants?
I wish you could come up and join me.
No, hang on.
No, that's a very, very good point. That's a very, very good point. Yeah. Wouldn't that make a lot of sense? Why do you need a gun? That's really, really a great point. So, that's the next question. Not one person here has mentioned anything about the victims. All we hear are abstractions. And by the way, I'll tell you something right now. I don't want my kid to take the risk. My kid's not taking the risk of the gun. I don't want that. So I totally agree with you. That should be one of the criteria. Why do you need a gun? Why do you need a bump stop? A gun that could shoot 1,000 times in 2 minutes? Tell me why you need that. That's a very, very good question. I answered it in the affirmative.
All right, I just want to be really quick. So I'm filling out an application to get it going. And it asks me the question, why do I want a firearm? And I put on the application, I want a firearm to protect myself against an abusive government. What are the odds my application is going to be approved? What are the odds? Okay. And so that defeats the whole purpose of the Second Amendment.
Alrighty here. I spend so much time with Lila now, so Lila, you got it. Last question.
Quick question.
Quick question.
Here it is, ready? Why?
Why?
I love your passion. Why do you say the NRA is a beast when it is we, the free people, that support it and keep it alive?
Well, the bottom line is, if you take the time to read my column and you go over every issue that I presented, that would make life safer for all of us, our children, ourselves, and it's what about our kids when you think about our grandkids. The NRA was against each and every one, and they have power. Now, I wrote in the column that one of the big changes was in '94, the Dems lost the currency, which was a good thing. The reason they lost, however, was because Clinton pushed gun control legislation. In terms of the SAFE Act, yeah, it's a ridiculous act. But if we as conservatives allow liberals to come up with these ideas, we're dead. So we should come up with reasonable ideas itself. Now, Jack Martin's running for county executive. The word that I got from my sources there was he went against the NRA and they withheld a lot of support for him, and that's why he lost. So the bottom line is, if you look at what they're pushing, such things as the SAFE law. Taking someone's gun away is not taking away their food. And by the way, the SAFE Act actually has a whole protocol that has to be followed. Lastly, in terms of the government, I love this government. And you know what? The people you're talking we're fighting against would be the cops and the military. Guess what? They're on our side. So when people talk about the government, yeah, we're really going to be shooting Joe the cop. Come on, come on. So that's what I have to get you. Please read the column. You have my email address there. If you find anything that's faulty or logical or wrong, I promise I'll change it.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to get to you, all right? You know, there's one thing I want to remind each of you about tonight, besides the Lincoln dinner, all right? And that is this one thing I just buried, all right? And it is here. Read and understand the United States Constitution, all right? Pick it up online, pick it up in the bookstore, wherever you can get it. Most of you should be able to pick it up for free. All right, read the Constitution. It is between us and an abusive government. All right. Other than that, Robert, nice job. I want to thank you very much. Yes, I did. All right, Donna, thank you very much. Nicholas, thank you very much.